Imagine, if you will, a country whose neighbors to the north have been fighting a bloody war for years. Ethiopia, a Soviet client state, Cuban troops and Russian advisors are there, a Marxist socialist government. Somalia, with an army nearly 4 times that of its neighbor to the south, armed with modern U.S. weapons, it has threatened to attack across the border to reclaim disputed territories. Imagine, if you will, a country whose neighbors to the south and west have just ended a bloody war. Uganda, a shattered economy, thousands of foreign troops on its soil, still reeling from 8 years of dictatorial rule under Idi Amin. And Tanzania, led by a socialist dictator, its troops invaded Uganda, its economy a shambles, virtually bankrupt after waging the war against Idi Amin. Imagine a country whose neighbor to the northwest has just recovered from an attempted military coup and is now home to perhaps 1 million refugees from the wars in Ethiopia and Uganda. The Sudan, poverty-stricken, and reportedly the haven now for troops loyal to Idi Amin who hope to attack Uganda and recapture that country. Imagine a country on a continent where military dictatorships are common, where a free press is rare, where democracy and capitalism are fragile where they exist at all, and where racial strife still continues in the southern part of the continent. Africa, a new battleground for the East-West Cold War, where the superpowers jockey for position to gain access to the continent's rich mineral resources, where despite the end of colonialism, Africans now play host to armed forces from Russia, Cuba, East Germany, France, England, the United States, Belgium, and others. Here, amidst this storm of confusion, lies one country at peace, basically democratic, capitalistic, with a free press, a country which recently went through a peaceful transition from one leader to another. This is Kenya, an anomaly in Africa, a country which not only survives but succeeds while surrounded by chaos. For the next hour, we'll take a look at Kenya, the eye in the African storm. To most Americans, Kenya is a kind of fictional place, known as much through the movies as through reality. Few Americans know much about the politics or government of East Africa, but we do know about Joy Adamson, Born Free, Elsa the Lion, and a host of other animal, adventure, and safari films, Cowboys in Africa, Something of Value, Up the Sandbox, The Lion, and many, many more, all made here. In fact, the beauty of this country has meant not only a booming movie business, but also a booming tourist business. More than 400,000 visitors came to Kenya last year, including about 30,000 Americans. And what did they all come here for? To see the wildlife. For example, here at Nairobi National Park, even though we're just a few minutes away from the high-rise hustle-bustle of downtown Nairobi, you can go in here and see nature's most magnificent creatures still roaming the plains just as they did millions of years ago. This is not a zoo. This is the Kenyan countryside. These guys live here. Nobody feeds them. There are no visiting hours. This is their territory. They're the ones who roam free. We're the ones hiding safely in our little cages on wheels. The magnificence of Kenya's wildlife is hard to describe. It's a humbling experience, seeing all these animals living naturally across the land. It reminds us that we as humans don't own the earth, but rather share it with all the other creatures. And you can find most of those other creatures here on the African plain. Again, this is not Africa USA or Lion Land. This is just what you see here, driving down the road. This is not going to be another animal story, but you can't talk about Kenya without at least acknowledging the animals, for this is Kenya's major attraction. Ironically, while just miles away, the big jet planes bring in the tourists from the United States, Europe, and all over the world, the in-way to watch the animals is on an old-fashioned balloon ride.
Please stay inside the basket until I say you can get out, because I need the weight inside, otherwise the balloon will fly.
The balloon safari is the thing here these days. You can swoop down low, there is no sound of engines to scare the animals away, and the balloon ride is a trip in itself. Quite an adventure for only $125 an hour. What strikes one here more than anything else is the never-ending cycle of life and death. Everywhere you look, there are babies, babies, babies. These horrible-looking things are called warthogs. They're about the ugliest animal in Africa. The African plain abounds not only with life, but also with death. This looks like an idyllic scene. Little lion cubs playing in the bush as their mother lioness looks on. But a closer look reveals that the mother lioness has just been gored badly by that warthog. The mother lioness was trying to kill the baby warthogs, and the warthog's mother won this battle to protect her own children. This beautiful lioness will pay the price for caring for her babies. Even the magnificent and powerful giraffe can become victim to the struggle for survival here on the East African plain. This giraffe fell down, injured one of its fragile legs, and couldn't get up again. The vultures knew it right away. They swooped down and attacked before the giraffe was even dead. They knew the giraffe was helpless, and in the bush, the helpless soon perish. These are hartebeest, a kind of African antelope, cast in an eerie blue light as the setting sun slips behind a cloud. There's a young baby hartebeest in the herd, and they sense trouble. And this is trouble. Cheetah, the fastest animal in the world. And another cheetah. They've seen the baby hartebeest. And so begins one of the most extraordinary chess games on Earth. Incredibly, this drama is played out in full view of these tourists. The cheetah don't take any notice of them. They're concentrating on only one thing, that herd of hartebeest. The cheetah work as partners. In spite of their 60-mile-per-hour speed, they can only maintain that speed for about 100 yards. So to be successful at the kill, they must use cunning to get close enough to the hartebeest so they can attack safely. And so the chess game begins. The cheetah move first to the left. 2 hartebeest scouts follow their every move. The cheetah sees them watching and lies down, hoping to put them off their guard. The other cheetah takes his cue and starts to walk the other way to the right. The plan is to attract the hartebeest's attention so that the cheetah to the left can then attack from behind. He keeps a watchful eye on any movements by the hartebeest. The cheetah to the left gets up now and walks left, forcing the hartebeest to divide their attention. The hartebeest scouts follow. Realizing this strategy isn't working, the cheetah to the left tries another ploy. Just rolling in the grass, fellas, not hungry at all. The cheetah on the right could win an Oscar for his performance. He's pretending not to care. He looks the other way. The hartebeest see their chance. One cheetah lying down and the other with his back to them. They start to retreat, but pause to take another cautious look. The cheetah to the right is still playing dumb. But the other cheetah realizes that this particular chess game has been played to a stalemate and gives up. But they both know there'll be another game tomorrow. So for these animals, life is a constant catch-22. To survive and eat, they must venture out into the open fields. But each time they do, they themselves become the potential prey for some predator. These zebra don't stand this way by accident. It's a kind of evolutionary buddy system. The zebra are common targets for lion, and the zebra are slow. They've learned that if they stand this way in pairs facing opposite directions, their combined 360-degree vision gives them an extra second's warning in the event of a lion attack. That extra second can mean the difference between life and death. Life in the African bush often means one animal killing another. But the sad thing about the African countryside here is that man does more killing than the animals. For dead animals are big business for poachers. This looks like a peaceful domestic scene on the East African plain. That's a mother rhinoceros and her young calf out grazing on a hot summer afternoon. They're part of a small herd of rhino who live here in this part of Kenya near the Somali border. Despite its size, the calf is only a few months old. In fact, as you can see, it's still nursing. What you can't see is the calf's father, because he was killed 2 weeks ago by a poisoned dart fired by Somalian poachers. The tusk was cut off and sold in Hong Kong for over $1,000. You see, this game warden is not protecting us from the animals. He's protecting the animals from us. He's part of the government's anti-poaching squad. Thousands of armed wardens scattered throughout the country trying to protect Kenya's wildlife. The rhino tusk is not made of ivory. That's not why it's valuable. Rhino tusk is ground up into a fine powder and sold in the Orient, where it is popular as an aphrodisiac. Kenya has been the only country in Africa to completely ban the hunting and killing of wild animals, even though the government knew the hunting ban would cost dearly in lost tourist dollars. Kenya's Minister of Wildlife Conservation is J.K. Mutinda. I asked him about the cost of that hunting ban.
If you take the total number of hunting visitors, at this time of ban, there were just about 1,000 hunters, foreign hunters coming to this country. In terms of direct revenue, that amounted to about 10 million Kenya shillings. In terms of indirect revenue, it was probably 10 times more money coming to this country. A hunter spent much more than a normal tourist.
The problem of keeping up with the poachers is made more difficult by the fact that Kenya gets very little cooperation from its neighbors.
Well, on the official side, theoretically there's cooperation. We have our regional meetings. The latest was in Botswana in July, and all these countries were represented. And according to the resolutions which were passed, each country is concerned about the poaching. That is, officially. In practice, it's a little bit tricky. Well, mainly because of the current political situations in these countries. It's not easy to chase a poacher across to Tanzania or, for that matter, to Uganda. So, in practice, it's not very easy.
The struggle to keep the animals alive often means a heavy price in human life.
Patrols we have set up recently actively over the last 1 year, a special anti-poaching squad, which is based in 4 corners of our republic. These are mobile units. They are specially equipped with fixed-wing aeroplanes and helicopters and special radios and special vehicles, cross-country vehicles, special weapons, because at times, in fact, they're called upon to tackle armed gangs. We've got lots of these armed gangs, some infiltrating from Somalia, and mainly on our northeastern and coastal areas, not much in the other areas. So these special squads are quite useful, and at times we've been getting into contact. In fact, we lost one of our people last week, got shot dead by one of the gangs. But anyway, we also shoot them dead in tons.
But while the government of Kenya spends millions to try and keep the animals here alive, some of the animals, incredibly, take their own lives. This is the Mara River separating Kenya from Tanzania. That's Tanzania on the other side to the right. And this is one of the most incredible animal stories you'll ever hear. According to the people I spoke to here, during the summer when water is scarce in Kenya, the wildebeest cross this dry riverbed over to the Serengeti Plain in Tanzania, looking for food and water. At the end of the summer, after the heavy rains have come back, the wildebeest come here to cross again and return to their native Mara Plain here in Kenya. But in August, the rains bring the water level of the Mara River up high, way over the heads of the wildebeest, who can't swim. The government built this bridge to make it easy for the wildebeest to cross the river. But the wildebeest don't like the feel of the concrete under their hooves. They insist on crossing the river just like they always have, and committing mass suicide in the process. What happens each autumn is the first wildebeest come to the Mara River and start to walk across it, or more accurately, under it. And they drown, of course. They can't swim. And more come through, and more drown, until the dead carcasses are piled high enough to form a bridge for the rest of the wildebeest herd. And then they charge across the bridge of carcasses back to their homeland here in Kenya. Game wardens here have seen as many as 3,000 dead wildebeest at one time, forming this incredible bridge of flesh. And no one knows whether the wildebeest are just too stupid to know they'll die, or more likely, whether they are just dedicated to their species, and they know that for some to survive, others must die. The baboon is perhaps the most fascinating animal to watch on the African plain, and the baboons are not only watched but studied. Joseph Popp is a graduate anthropologist from Harvard University. He's been here in Kenya studying one group of baboons for 3 years.
Well, baboons seem to be in a critical point in the Serengeti and Mara ecosystem. They're important dispersal agents for trees. They're important in terms of being generalized herbivores, eating a wide variety of foods, highly adaptable animals. In terms of social behavior, the implications, I think, are profound for the study of all other mammals. the role of kinship, the role of aggression, patterns of troop cohesion and so forth. Baboons are interesting in that they interact at very high rates. Very few other animals, including other primates, show such high rates of social interaction. What that means is for a given amount of time, you can collect a lot of field data. And that's quite important in terms of doing a study within a reasonable period of time. We've been here for 3 years, and we seem like we're just scratching the surface. There's a lot of work to be done, and it would be much more difficult if the animals weren't so social. Anybody who's watched baboons even for 15 minutes, I think, and it may be a layman or a scientist, has to see some patterns of social behavior that are, in terms of the motor patterns, in terms of the emotions expressed, highly similar to human behavior. When we see, for example, a weaning conflict in infant mother baboon pairs, it is so analogous to human tantrums that one can't help but think that there's similar motivating factors, perhaps at an evolutionary level. And what we hope to do is to understand these things that relate to familial conflict, an important problem in Western society today. And if we can understand why infant and mother baboons fight and why sometimes escalated aggression results, perhaps we can gain some insights into other animals, possibly even man.
Kenya, in fact, is well known not only for its animal research, but for the archaeological research here, especially the work done by the famous Leakey family. Here at the Leakey Institute in Nairobi, you can see the results of the Leakey's research, the earliest remains of man ever found. This human skull is 3 million years old. According to Professor Richard Leakey, the plains of East Africa show us not only where animal life began, but possibly even where human life first began. Some have even theorized that the Bible's Garden of Eden was here in Kenya.
The concept of a Garden of Eden is one which I think we have to try and correct. It suggests that mankind developed in a single place at a single time rather in a sort of a garden setting. And I think one would have to make the point that Africa, if there was such a place, must have been the Garden of Eden. And remember that Africa is 3 times the size as the continental landmass of the United States. It is a vast continent, and over this vast continent, over hundreds of thousands of years, evolution was occurring, leading to the crucial stages in mankind. Kenya is very fortunate in that we have had a major program in the study of prehistory since the early 20s. This National Museum has played a leading part in encouraging research into human origins, and a great deal of work has been done. But no matter how hard the National Museum or my parents or I had tried to do this work, it doesn't alter the fact that we wouldn't have got anywhere had this country not been well suited to the discovery of fossils. And what makes Kenya so important is that running north-south through our country, through Tanzania and also through Ethiopia, is a geological feature known as the Rift Valley. And this Rift Valley has opened up stratified rocks in which fossils are to be found. And it's only
the significance of Professor Leakey's work is not only in finding the oldest remains of man, but in finding evidence that man as a species was not aggressive and violent by nature, but in fact showed signs of great cooperation.
Is say that the idea that humans have this killer ape inheritance, which has been popularized by Ardrey and others in their books, African Genesis, The Naked Ape, and so on and so forth, draws a lot of its strength from the prehistoric record. And what we have said is that if you examine that prehistoric record, it is patently clear that there is no evidence to sustain their argument. There is no doubt that humans today are aggressive. There is also no doubt that behavior doesn't fossilize. And what we're trying to do in the books that I've written with Roger Lewin are explore possible lines of analysis of the evidence that has been left behind, particularly the archaeological evidence. And the one thing that becomes very clear is that there is no evidence for aggression at all until you get to the last 15 or 20,000 years. Prior to that, remains of man show no sign of violence, and remains of man show no signs of anything but being remains of man. I mean, bones don't tell you how they behaved. But you do find campsites, you do find living sites. which suggests that people were sharing food and people had a cooperative type of behavior that has its roots back 2.5 million years ago. And if you take...
While most of the people in Kenya seem concerned about the survival of the wildlife here, Professor Leakey says we should not lose sight of the fact that man himself may be an endangered species.
That mankind is on this planet as a result of a series of biological events or accidents, if you like, and that accidents can happen again which would result in extinction. And I think there are far too many people, particularly leaders of the human species, who are pretty sure that there is some God-given protection to humanity and that nothing we do ultimately can cause us to go extinct. And this is very false.
One of the most endangered animals in East Africa is the elephant. The reason is the elephant tusk and the great demand for ivory. The elephant population in Kenya has dropped 50% in the past decade. There are only some 60,000 elephants in Kenya now. Just 10 years ago, there were over 120,000. This statue at the Leakey Institute pays tribute to one of Kenya's most famous elephants, Ahmed. He made the Guinness Book of Records for having the longest tusks ever seen, both more than 9 feet long. Ahmed died about 6 years ago at the age of 60. It's the animals who bring the tourists to Kenya, and it is the tourists who bring in much of Kenya's hard currency and help feed its economy.
Kenya is not a wealthy country by any means. It has no oil, very few mineral resources, no gold, no diamonds. But it does have what the Kenyans call black gold, these coffee beans. Coffee is Kenya's #1 export and its biggest industry.
These coffee plants mean the difference between poverty and prosperity for Kenyans. For Kenya's economy is closely tied to the coffee market and coffee prices. It's a precarious economic base, for as any consumer knows, coffee prices have been on a roller coaster for years. But Kenya fortunately has more than just coffee. It is also a major producer of tea, and its tea is excellent. You can find Kenyan tea all over Africa and Europe. These agricultural workers picking tea leaves here make about $25 a month. That's not much, obviously, but with the pooled income of many members of one large family and a lifestyle which has no rent, no electricity bill, and few other expenses, these rural Kenyans manage to survive. But most young Kenyans don't want to work in the fields. They want to get out of the countryside and into Nairobi, where they can lead the more exciting city life and make more money. The goal of most young Kenyans is a white-collar government job. These civil servants average about $65 a month, and that's not much here, since Nairobi is not a cheap city to live in. About 25% of Kenya's workers do work for the government, and Kenya's civil service is considered the best in Black Africa. For those who can't land white-collar jobs, the next best thing is a job in industry, working in one of Kenya's many factories. There are many American manufacturing plants here. General Motors has a major car assembly plant in Nairobi, and Firestone has a big tire factory here. And there is a growing Kenyan manufacturing industry, like the Kiamba blanket factory just outside Nairobi. Average wages for a factory worker here are about $65 a month, but the workers put in 45 hours a week to earn that money. The American companies pay the highest wages to factory workers, about $100 a month, but there are few benefits and many people waiting for those jobs. Kenya has no welfare system, no unemployment compensation, though there is a social security system with very modest payments. But the vast majority of Kenya's people live in the countryside, 90% of them, and theirs is a primitive economy, some cash, lots of barter. The economic life of most villagers is centered on the village marketplace, where you can buy just about anything from cows and goats to clothes and exotic drugs. It's really nothing more than a huge swap meet, African style. But this swap meet goes on every day. The going prices here, about $150 for a cow. You can get a little one for about $75. A good goat will run you about $50. There's lots of bargaining and cash only here, no credit. In the city markets, the abundance is overwhelming. This is a kind of farmer's market in downtown Nairobi. The urban Kenyans do not go hungry, and the prices are pretty cheap. Kenya, unlike most African countries, is basically self-sufficient in food, and in fact exports some food to other African countries. Many of Kenya's people work in the tourism industry. About 25,000 people are directly employed in tourism, and more than 100,000 work in jobs which service Kenya's many tourists. Tourism is Kenya's third largest industry after coffee and tea. This is a souvenir factory of sorts, but there are no machines in this factory, only men. These workers are not employees, they are freelance craftsmen who do piecework, making and selling one souvenir at a time. It's an amazing sight, a kind of assembly line of sculptors, and they are good. And if they are fast, they can make as much as $5 a day, and that's good pay here in Kenya. There is more and more work in Kenya these days in heavy construction, for Kenya, and in particular Nairobi, is growing fast. More roads, more schools, and lots more housing. The housing in Kenya is as varied as you can imagine. Here in Nairobi you can find anything from run-down old buildings to modern high-rise apartments. And housing is not cheap in Nairobi. A simple 3-bedroom condo like this goes for over $50,000. A nice suburban twin in a good Nairobi neighborhood fetches more than $60,000. And a fancy single home in Nairobi's classiest section goes for well over $100,000. That's big stuff in a country where the average worker makes less than $100 a month. But the Kenyans are good businessmen and good capitalists, and lots of young black families buy and move into these new homes. One of Nairobi's biggest new businesses is the condominium, a very recent introduction here in the land of thatched huts. And the condo king of Kenya is a black American who returned to Kenya a few years ago to introduce American-style condominiums to East Africa. This is Jack Butler, a native of Boston, a former resident of the Bay Area, a graduate of Harvard, and now a businessman in Nairobi. Butler first came here to Africa in the late 1960s.
Those were very tumultuous years. At that time I was a young man in college and just out of college, and really the turbulence of the times in the States made some of us feel that we weren't sure just how it was all going to turn out, and I guess we were looking for alternatives when in looking to places like Africa or other places outside the States. And I guess this did play a role in my deciding to try to settle in Africa.
Jack Butler came here to Kenya with the idealism of the late 60s and early 70s, filled with a new sense of pride which had come to black Americans. But Jack Butler had some adjustments to go through when he got here.
Well, for example, I had, shall we say, adopted a kind of Pan-African political tradition, you might say. So coming to Africa, I was perhaps looking for shall we say, support or agreement among our African brothers or cousins, you know, for that particular outlook. Now, I found that that the political thinking of Kenyans hadn't, shall we say, reached that stage yet. Kenyans were still very much concerned about how to unify their own country, how to bring themselves together. And even though that you could say that this did touch on Pan-Africanism in some way, their brand of Pan-Africanism, shall we say, stopped at Kenya's boundaries, whereas, you know, our point of view was really, you know, a bit broader, yeah, more continental. Or
The irony of Jack's return is that as a black man, he felt he was going home to Africa, to his roots. But once Jack got here, he learned, as we all do, the truth of the adage about going home again.
The idea of coming to Africa was really, you know, the roots idea, you know, coming and trying to reestablish roots on, say, the motherland continent. And I must say that in terms of the reactions and friendships that I've developed and attitudes of Kenyans, I can't say that I've been entirely disappointed that this idea has been made entirely not valid. But at the same time, you know, culturally, by birth, culturally, and in other ways, by education, you know, I am an American and I can't get away from that, and no one else is going to see me any different either. So at some point I had to reach this place of saying, okay, look, even though Africa is the motherland and all that, you know, I am an expatriate. I am a foreigner in Africa.
There are in fact many Americans living and working and running businesses in Kenya, and they're not all black by any means. Saul Gordon is a white man, a New Yorker, but he too got hooked on the charm of Kenya.
But when I came here, I knew this was a winner. This was it. This has the beauty that life can give you only in very few places. The rest has to come from you. I mean, that you can get anywhere, but there's an outside design that you can get in very few places according to your taste, and this was it. I'll put it in a way where my brother once went into a tour opera and he said, do you want to see the beginning, the creation? Do you want to see where swords are beaten into plowshares, where the lamb lies down with the lion? Come to East Africa, because you'll be amazed at the number of animals that stay together. Of course, when the lion is hungry, they sense it, but otherwise, the zebra, the giraffe, the gazelle, they're all there together. The first time my brother saw this with me, because I came here first, I couldn't take him away, and he wouldn't leave. He just said, I have such a sense of calm, such a sense of beauty, such a sense of what once was, and why does man, woman have to lose this? And that's the whole story in a nutshell.
You all set?
Saul's family appears to be a typical American family. One dog, 2 kids, an attractive wife, a hard-working husband, and a lovely home in the suburbs. The only difference here is this home is in the suburbs of Nairobi.
I don't think it's that much different from raising a family in the middle of Nairobi. We have to be a bit careful because there are lions around, snakes around, so we have to keep a lot of baboons. We have to watch the children a little more carefully. But other than that, there are no big differences.
What about...
I asked Marcia Gordon what she thought was the best part of living in Africa.
For one thing, we have a very, very easy life. I have lots of leisure. I'm not hampered by having to do housework or the drudgery of day-to-day life, so it gives me lots of freedom to pursue interests and spend my time just doing things I like to do. The weather is wonderful. The people in Africa are wonderful. I feel I can walk in any place and my children are accepted and people respond in a very warm way. You have the chance of meeting so many different kinds of people. I guess the only part, well, I miss being near my family and my old friends. It's a long, long ways from America. And perhaps the knowledge that my kids are not totally Kenyan and we're not in America, so they're kind of neither one nor the other, and that it's a little bit difficult, and the feeling.
One
is
thing the
totally
Gordons
that this
have
is
to
my-
worry about is school for their two young children. But Marcia says that is no problem.
The children attend school in Nairobi. They go to the French school, where all their education is in French. And we just drive them in every morning and pick them up in the afternoon. They might miss a bit of their American identity, but they're gaining so much in terms of being very cosmopolitan and mixing with children. In their school, they have children from Rwanda, Zaire, France, Italy, almost every country where there are French-speaking people, and it's a tremendous advantage to them. They accept it as normal that children speak 3 or 4 languages, that people do things in all different ways. It's a tremendous cultural experience.
But in spite of it all, Marcia Gordon says it's still nice to know the United States is there, and that she still has and can use her American passport.
But political situations can always change. Possibly things could go sour. I don't know. At this point, Kenya looks very, very promising, and we consider it home. But you can never know. It's not America that you think will be there forever and ever. You know we'll always be there.
Kenya is probably the only country in Africa, and possibly the only country in the world, which spends more of its national budget on education than on defense. For in this African country, going to school is the key to getting ahead.
Where Kenya up. In a people resource, the government has given top domestic priority to educate its growing population. Matter of fact, this year will spend an amazing 30% of its total national budget building and educating its young people.
Education for Kenyan children begins here in the elementary school like this one in Embakasi. The first 5 years of school, the government pays. After that, the government only pays for a portion of the student pay the rest. But it's not very expensive. At the average school runs only $100 a year. However, workers who earn an average per month outside, that can be a fair amount of money. The education problem is a serious one. Booming population growth, one of the world. Population is growing here at 3.5 year, and the average rural family still has about kids. But progress has been significant. 75% of all children now attend school in Kenya. That's the highest average in Africa. We sat in on a 5th grade class here at the elementary school in Embakasi, and we couldn't help but be impressed with the discipline and seriousness of the students.
3 plus 4. 3 plus 4. 7. 1, 2, 3. 8. 6 plus and the Deborah. Again? 8. 4 plus 4. El Niño and Swell. 8. 6 plus 6.
12.
12. 8 plus 8.
16.
16. Negative 2 plus negative 2.
It's ironical that these schools seem better disciplined than many American schools. Yet one often hears the complaint in our country that it is the presence of minority students who create the discipline problem. Being a student in Kenya is not easy. There's no school bus. Most of these students walk several miles to school. One I spoke to walks 7 miles each way. That takes an hour and a half each way. And when he gets home from school, it's not milk and cookies and TV. It's work on the farm, grazing the cattle, or otherwise helping take care of the family land. These kids get homework, probably more than your child does. The students told me it's about 3 hours a night, usually with the fireplace as the source of light. After elementary school, which here is grades 1 through 7, students have to pass an exam to qualify for high school, grades 8 through 12, so only the best students get into school. And as you can see, the curriculum is relevant.
Slave trade is buying and selling of human.
This column
Slave trade is by selling of human beings.
The books which are lost, which have been taken home by you. I would like you to come with new books. No books. If you are coming with an old book, you will be asked to pay for a new book. I hope this is very clear. When you are coming back on 9th January, there is no laughter. On 9th January next year, you must come with a new book. And I want
It's Christmas break time at this girls' high school in the province of Kipsigis. This is a boarding school, and the students come from all over the country. It's one of Kenya's better schools. Last year, more than 80% of its graduates went on to university. Darshan Singh is the headmaster at the school. He says one reason education is improving so rapidly in Kenya is the increased interest on the part of Kenyan parents.
One thing which is very important, which I have noticed in the last 20 years, that the parents are becoming more conscious of their duties towards the children. In the past I remember no care, but now I feel parents are coming, and really anxious to have the education.
How would you compare the standards of your school to a typical European school or American?
No. First of all, I haven't seen those, but I think we are still behind on that matter. I can only talk about when I was in UK about 15, 20 years back. I think we are lacking facilities which are not available here, definitely, as compared to those schools.
What's the best thing you see in the students from Kenya?
The girls, as I told you, that the girls, they are hardworking, they study. There are, of course, some cases, always, which usual cases who try to sneak or go away, but majority of the girls, they are really hardworking. And whatever you tell them, they do. Cleaning of the school, keeping the school clean, you can see at the end of the day, you don't see even a piece of paper around. Otherwise, if you go to any other boys' school, I don't know what sort of situation you will find, but I'm very happy with them. Very, very happy with them.
The school's headmaster may be happy with his Kenyan girls, but the women of Kenya are not very happy with their status. For Women's Lib has not yet made much of an impact here. For most women in Kenya, life is difficult, much more difficult than for their male counterparts. In the countryside, women are almost like slaves. They do most of the work. Traditionally, the women work the land. They walk miles a day to fetch and bring back the day's water supply for cooking and washing. There is virtually no running water in the villages. These gourds and water cans weigh more than 40 pounds each when they're full of water. The average hike to water is some 5 miles each way. The women haul the firewood home for cooking, and they carry the excess produce to market for cash to buy other necessities. And the burden of motherhood is a big one. Most families in the countryside still have lots of children. The average right now is about 10 births per family, though they don't all survive. In the more traditional tribes, like the Maasai, the young women still go through a circumcision ritual when they reach puberty. That's meant to defeat the pleasure mechanisms for a woman, so she won't be tempted to be unfaithful to her husband. This in spite of the fact that some Kenyan men have more than one wife. Among the Maasai, they may each have 4 or 5 wives. One of the reasons for the bigamy is a matter of social status. Traditionally in Kenya, the man pays a dowry to a girl's family. Therefore, to have many wives, like having many cars in our culture, is considered a sign of wealth in tribal society. The more wives, the wealthier the man must be. The other side of that custom is the reason why families have so many children, because a daughter can essentially be sold for the dowry. Lots of daughters means lots of dowries and more money for the parents. The issue for women in Kenya's countryside is not equal pay, not sexual equality, but fundamental human rights.
Be aggressive, that's what I mean. Be aggressive, baby.
For women in the city, life is changing. More and more women are demanding equality, going on to university, and moving into good jobs. Catherine Correa is the highest-ranking woman in the Kenyan government. She's the Undersecretary for Finance in the Ministry of Tourism. She oversees a staff of thousands, and she earns over $20,000 a year, which in Kenya is a pretty good salary. Mrs. Correa says that women have come a long way since the early days of independence.
Obviously, in those days, the opportunities were not very many. I would say opportunities really were very slim. But in various areas, like in academic world, the opportunities were there, because if you're a brainy person and you've got a contribution to make, they will always tap it. But I would say where it came to real public life, when you have to go out and work among the communities, you found that women were not readily accepted. They are not as readily accepted as it is today. But
in spite of the new opportunities for women in urban areas, Mrs. Correa concedes that there is still much to be done for the rest of Kenya's women.
I must say that we have still got a long way to go to get our women in the rural areas to the level at which we are. But still, even ourselves, we have had to work all our lives to make sure that we are not that lady at home who is drawing water on at their back. We got to look at it not strictly from the Western type, point of view, but from our own, cultural way of life. We certainly are going to need a lot more time to bring about social change for these people to realize that they can really do better, that they don't have to carry that water. The process of social change, takes time, and the people must be ready to change. So even if you try to impose ideas on these people and they are not ready to change, you are not going to succeed very much. But I must say
that Mrs. Correa is optimistic about what lies ahead for Kenyan women.
I see a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of social organizations who are devoted to opening up avenues where you can absorb young girls for careers. We have now started producing doctors. In my time, if you went to college, you were one of the very chosen few, because you were supposed to stop at school certificate level, and maybe have some career, maybe nursing or teaching, and get married.
For most women in Kenya, the goal is still marriage and lots of kids, and the big day is still the wedding day. The Kenyans are a religious people. This wedding is being held at Nairobi's main Catholic church. The vast majority are Christian, mostly Protestant. There is a small Muslim minority, and about a third of the people, mostly in the villages, still follow traditional tribal beliefs. Tribal religions create problems, for one of the traditional beliefs is in the power of the witch doctor. These women are attending a play put on by the staff of St. Clair's Hospital in the province of Kep Long. The play is about a woman who develops symptoms of tuberculosis. She goes to the witch doctor first.
I was expecting you. I dreamt that you were coming. You were on the way. Do you know that? You knew I was coming? Yes, I dreamt. Really, you knew? Yes, I did. I dreamt that you were coming, coughing, and of course
the witch doctor tells her to kill a cow and pour the blood on the ground, and all will be better.
Yes, I am.
She then goes to a regular doctor at the hospital.
Just give me medicine. I go and come back.
First of all, I'm going to listen to your chest. Then I will take you somewhere where they will check your blood and see what's wrong with you.
She gets cured and lives happily ever after.
But you know,
This hospital is run by the Franciscan missionary here. There are about 100 students studying nursing. There are 200 beds, about 100 outpatient contacts a day, and 2 full-time doctors. Dr. William Fryman is from Holland. He is the hospital director here. I talked to him about the problems of running a hospital in the middle of the African bush.
There are a few difficult problems. One is tuberculosis, what is widespread here. People are, for example, spitting on the floor, children are creeping on the floor, and so they get a TB. Another big problem is burns. Children are falling in the fire because the mother doesn't take care. The fire plates are very low, and mostly they are so severely burned that nothing can be done anymore. Another big problem is transport. We are having a great number of deliveries here, about 300 a month, but very often they come too late. Women with a postpartum hemorrhage cannot find transport, and finally they have found transport and they die sometimes in the matatu, in the taxi. We are operating here in this hospital only emergency cases, acute abdomens, fractures, people who are beating up, and especially in this area, people are fighting quite a lot. We are here just on the border between Kisi and Kipsigis, and I must say they sometimes don't agree, and the result is very big wounds or sometimes arrows in the abdomen and so on. So
there are serious health problems here in Kenya, and the problems are compounded by the ever-present witch doctor and the village belief in voodoo medicine.
Sometimes we get really poisons due to native medicine, and well, I consider a patient where I really don't know what he's having as a patient who has taken poison. That is still really the custom here. Another problem here is the famous Kisi operation. That is one of the latest operations done by private doctors, witch doctors, at home. It consists of taking out a part of the skull, and they lay the brains open, they let it granulate. And I must say, even our nurses still believe in it, because they almost don't have infections, what is fantastic. The reason they do it is sometimes because of headache or because the patient has fallen down years ago. And well, you see then many women still here with very big scars on the head. It is one of the latest, biggest operations done here in Kenya.
And it's a problem because do patients die or get sick?
Well, I get only then the complications, and sometimes people die because the wound is not closing well and the brain fluid is coming out. And We have had one case last year who died because of this operation.
The old tribal customs of the countryside contrast sharply with the modern lifestyle of the city. For as we've seen, there is a great diversity among the population here.
There are about 15 million people in Kenya, nearly 1 million of them living here in Nairobi, probably the most sophisticated capital in all of Black Africa. The Kenyans are very proud people, proud of their country, proud of what they've been able to accomplish in just 15 years of independence.
And they have accomplished a lot. Kenya has a positive balance of trade, rare in Africa. Kenya has an abundance of food, relatively low unemployment, and an economy which continues to grow. The stores are full of goods and the country is at peace, despite the swirl of conflict surrounding it. The people went through a smooth and peaceful transition of administrations from founder Jomo Kenyatta to the new president, Daniel Arap Moi. Kenya's people are industrious and hard-working, and they have most of the ingredients of the modern Western lifestyle. The government's top priority right now is expanding the school system, but high on the list also is improved services for the rural areas, and that means bringing water and power into the villages. This is the village of Gitaro, where President Moi is about to dedicate a new $120 million power plant, which will bring electricity to this area for the first time. And in Kenya, this kind of dedication is a big event.
Wananchi, the growth of a young but thriving economy like ours depends, among other things, upon the availability of adequate and cheap electrical energy. We need electricity to propel machines in our industries, to operate complex equipment in our hospitals, schools, and other social establishments. Our homes, streets require electricity for cooking, heating, and lighting. In very few activities in life, indeed, we do not require the services of electricity. It is mainly for this reason that the opening of Gitaro hydroelectric station today is an important milestone towards the government's declared objective of improving the lot of our people who live in the rural areas.
The government has made quite a bit of progress in the past 15 years in improving the quality of life for most of the people of Kenya, but one major segment of the population has been left far behind, the proud but primitive Maasai.
What can one say about the Maasai? They are difficult to describe. They live the most primitive, backward life you could imagine, yet they are a handsome tribe of virtual supermen. The Maasai are a living museum and a testament to the theory of the survival of the fittest. For here, only the fit survive, in living conditions which are harsh, to say the least. The Maasai are in fact an embarrassment to the Kenyan government. Amidst all the progress and development elsewhere in the country, life in the Maasai villages goes unchanged from the way it was thousands of years ago. The Maasai shun modern housing, modern clothing, gadgets like cars and electricity, and they want no government money, no redevelopment, no schools. They believe in their lifestyle, and they simply want to be left alone. Their lifestyle is bizarre. This is the Maasai village of Beasley, a few hours' drive from Nairobi. About 50 people live here in this village, about 8 families. Each man has 2 wives, and each family has an average of 5 to 6 children. But it often takes 10 births to get 5 survivors out here in the bush. Most Maasai men, in fact, have 4 to 5 wives, but this is a small Maasai village, and they are short on women. The Maasai live in huts called manyatas. They are made of cow dung, mud, and twigs. The manyata is crawling with lice, flies, and roaches. The Maasai never bathe. They don't believe in it. And they have been relegated to living in the arid parts of Kenya, where there is very little water, and so none to be wasted on bathing. But they somehow are amazingly clean. Adult life for a young Maasai man or woman begins with a circumcision ritual. For women, it usually occurs shortly after puberty. For men, usually in the early 20s. Only after the circumcision ritual can a man and woman marry. Premarital sex is strictly forbidden, except during the period of the circumcision ritual, once each year, which becomes a kind of Mardi Gras time for the Maasai, when anything goes. The Maasai man will customarily make available one of his wives to a male visitor, but any illicit sex outside that custom could result in the death of the violator. Every Maasai man carries a spear or stick. That is the traditional weapon for combat against other tribes and against the animals. The Maasai are known for their extraordinary ability to kill a lion with their spear and their bare hands. In fact, it is legendary on the East African savanna that a lion will attack a man, but never a Maasai. The Maasai are known as good fighters. You've heard the phrase Maasai warrior. But their total ignorance of weapons, other than their sticks, has led them to lose most tribal wars and thus end up with the most undesirable and dry land in Kenya. The Maasai diet does not come from your basic 3 food groups, yet those who survive are as healthy and as strong as could be. The Maasai diet consists mainly of raw milk. That's it, milk. On a festive occasion, they will kill a cow and drink its blood. And occasionally they'll kill a goat and eat its meat. But the basic diet, day after day, is milk. Ironically, the Maasai sometimes farm and grow crops, but they use them only to sell at the marketplace for money, to buy more cows and goats. There are no mirrors to be found in a Maasai village, and if you try to be cute and snap a Polaroid picture of the Maasai and give it to them, you're looking for trouble. The Maasai believe it is evil to look at oneself, and they spend a lifetime never knowing what they look like. There are nearly 500,000 Maasai in Kenya, and it doesn't look like they're going to change. in spite of all the efforts of the Kenyan government to bring them into the 20th century.
Kenya has set an example for the rest of Black Africa by being one of the continent's most stable governments. Kenya is basically a democracy with a free enterprise system and a free press. But Kenya is not without its political problems.
Kenya was born as a result of the efforts of one man mainly, this man, Jomo Kenyatta. He led the Mau Mau Rebellion, which drove the British out, ended decades of colonialism, and brought independence to Kenya. But in spite of Kenyatta's efforts and those of his successor, President Moi, there are many cracks in Kenya's democratic structure. One big crack is the lack of a two-party system. There is only one political party in Kenya, and people who have challenged that party in the past have been known to disappear under questionable circumstances. Others who have challenged the dominant KANU party have found themselves accused of various crimes ranging from smuggling to wife-beating and hauled off to jail after what some people feel were trumped-up charges and kangaroo trials.
There's no law against a second or a third or a fourth political party in Kenya as it is now. Nobody stops you organizing a political party. It's just the nature of the people that stops you, because once you start a political party, it tends to fizzle out within 2 years. That happened before under President Kenyatta. I don't know that I can say that it will happen again, but the people, by and large, want to oppose one another within one party, like it was traditional to them. You know, the old system, the African system, where you argued under a tree until you exhausted all the arguments, and a consensus emerged. And once that consensus emerged, everybody sort of toed the line. This is a traditional outlook of the Kenyan people. I think it will tend to hold.
Manua Wayaki is Kenya's foreign minister, the equivalent of our Secretary of State. Wayaki is considered among the brightest of Kenya's politicians and a likely choice to one day be president. Wayaki is a member of the dominant Kikuyu tribe. Jomo Kenyatta was a Kikuyu, and in fact it was the Kikuyu tribe who led the revolt against the British. But it has also been the Kikuyu and the revolutionary leaders who got most of the land after the Mau Mau Rebellion. And in spite of Kenyatta's heroic contributions to Kenya's modern-day stability, he was not above charges of corruption. Kenyatta reportedly made a lot of money protecting poachers. His successor, President Moi, is said to have taken bribes when he was in charge of issuing immigration permits. And in fact, despite Kenya's revolution, which was aimed in part at narrowing the gap between the rich and the poor, Kenya's free capitalist economy still leaves a wide gap between the haves and the have-nots.
In the new setup, there was always a danger that some smart section would go off and become very good capitalists, perhaps surpass you in the West. And this is exactly the problem. It is true that there is a sector of our people who are extremely wealthy. And there is also true that there is a sector of very poor people. But it is also true to say that our government is trying to arrange things in such a way, particularly in the next development plan, that whereas we concentrated mostly in the high production areas in our budget allocations, this time we're going to allocate finance from the budget for the poorer people.
Wayaki's specialty, though, is foreign affairs, not domestic matters. And in fact, Kenya has become an increasingly important ally to the United States ever since the revolution in Iran and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The United States recently signed a long-term agreement with Kenya to use its port city of Mombasa as a military base and staging area for possible action in the Persian Gulf. But relations between Kenya and the United States have been shaky over the past few years, largely as a result of American support for Kenya's enemy, Somalia. The United States has backed Somalia in its war with Ethiopia ever since Ethiopia became allied with the Soviet Union. But Wayaki is not worried about Soviet designs in East Africa.
Well, the Russians designed theirs, I think, according to Marxism, Leninism. Now, who was Marx? He was a European living in London or Europe or someplace. Lenin was a Russian living in Russia. They have no relevance to the African mind. If you tell our people here, you can go on the platform and try it if you like. Tell them about Marx and about Lenin. They might easily think they were colonialists. And whenever a person is going to come and tell us, the moment he looks like the former colonial masters, it's fortunate that he doesn't come up because Marx is dead and then he's dead. But if they were to come up and ride up on a soapbox and start talking to our people, they would say, well, this is another way of getting back here. This is another way of taking our land away from us. These are real problems. I don't think that the way you look at it from the US is really relevant to the way we Africans look at our own problems. It's not always the same. You're tuned to a different wavelength from us. You tell us that the Russians have a design, but you tell us in the context of East-West confrontation, not in the context of what is good and what is bad for Africa. You decide for us what is good for Africa. You don't want us to think for ourselves, isn't it? You think that, oh, these communists are going to come to Africa and they will rob you of your raw materials and your markets and all. These are the things that are motivating you. But do you think that the African sees those things exactly like you? Because if you're so concerned about these things, let's be honest with each other. Why is it that you're concentrating most of your investments in Southern Africa, about which you know we're very sensitive? Why is it that US multinationals are still pouring in money, despite this movement in the States, which is growing here, into South Africa, where there is not colonialism, fascism? Now, the scale is communism versus fascism. This is in the African mind, and this should be told to the American people honestly, by people like ourselves, because we have no axe to grind. We're not. I'm a friend of the United States. So many of our people here are friends of the United States, and you ought to be told the truth, that as long as you are going to support what is evil, racism in Southern Africa, in the sense that you're going to support them by investing, I mean, we'll keep telling you not to. As long as you are prepared to veto things at the Security Council level, and so on, you will find that the African mind will look at you with some kind of suspicion. So when you tell them there's a huge Russian bear that's going to grab you and knock you down, they say, oh, and what about that huge fascist bear in South Africa, which is already knocking me down, leave alone the Russian one, which is going to come tomorrow.
Racial discrimination was, of course, the motivating irritant that led to the Mau Mau rebellion here and the ouster of the British colonialists. For the Europeans, the white men owned everything and had all the money, and the black men, the Kenyans, did all the work. But revolution and independence have brought some sweet revenge to the blacks and coloreds of Kenya. This is the Sportsman's Arms Hotel in the Rift Valley. Its owner today is Mr. Shamsu Din, an Indian. For Mr. Din, it's been a long road from racial outcast to proud owner. Back in 1942, when Kenya was still a British colony, Din worked as a clerk for a British commissioner. The two of them came here to the Sportsman's Arms one day to eat, but Din was not allowed in.
You have to be white to get into hotels like New Stanley, Outspan, or Sportsman's Arms. It was not so much of humiliation, but it was so much of it comes to a spiritual thing, you know. Basically, we are all equal. And if I am a traveler, a genuine traveler, and if I'm thirsty and I want a cup of tea, nothing should stop me from coming into this hotel and have a cup of tea so long as I pay. But that was not the point. The point was that you had to be white to get in, however thirsty or however hungry you are. That was way back in 42. I'm talking about 42 when I was working. And little did I know that one day I'll own it.
But despite this success story, Asians like Shamsu Din in fact have been caught in the racial no man's land of being neither white nor black. When Britain ruled Kenya, the Asians were discriminated against because they were too colored. But when Kenyatta took over, the Asians were discriminated against because they were not colored enough. All the Indians in Kenya who made up most of the merchant class and who held many of the technical and professional jobs were told to leave after independence. It was only after Kenyatta's death and the liberalized racial policies of the new President Moi that Asians were again allowed to go back into business and hold key jobs. Joe Rodriguez is one such Asian. He's from Bombay, India. And back in 1964, shortly after independence, Rodrigues was managing editor of Kenya's biggest daily newspaper, The Nation. But Rodrigues was told he could never be editor-in-chief of the paper because he was not black. That policy changed when President Moi took over, and now Joe Rodrigues is the editor-in-chief. But Rodrigues' problems didn't end then. As the man in charge of Kenya's most influential newspaper, he found that a free press is not always a free press, and that an editor's life here can be dangerous.
I would be able to say without fear of contradiction that if I were to get up and decide I was going to write editorials every day attacking the head of state, I wouldn't last long, nor would the paper. But there would be no purpose in doing that. I think those of us who have been around since independence have developed a knack or an extra sense, and we are able to fathom how far we should go, not how far we can go. We can go overboard and then we'd be in trouble. The proprietor, the principal shareholder, has always said it's no use being foolhardy and going the whole hog and criticizing the establishment if in the end you're going to be banned and then you have no platform to say anything at all. So it's better to, on occasion, pull your punches and not go 100% of the way.
You mentioned that if you were to go too far in criticizing the government or top officials, you or the newspaper, might not be here anymore. What specifically did you mean? What would happen if you did go past the accepted boundaries? In what way would the government get back at you?
Well, there are always the laws of the land, and they have always existed in this country as in all others. I think libel and sedition and defamation and things like that. But there is a possibility that the government might decide to take a newspaper editor to court and charge him with sedition or incitement or something like that. In a less democratic atmosphere, editors have been just simply locked up without recourse to courts of law. That can happen in very many parts of Africa. And the same legislative machinery exists even in Kenya. Though ever since he's assumed office, President Moi has made it clear that he's going to tolerate the press and allow it to say whatever it wants, so long as it doesn't go beyond the bounds of reason. We in the newspapers have a distinct feeling that the new government is much more receptive to the sort of criticism which would be voiced through a newspaper, in the columns of a newspaper, and would be responsive to that sort of criticism, because the president has made it very clear in the past few weeks, and I think in the past 2 months or so, that he is not going to take things lying down, not going to allow people to do the sort of things they were doing in the past, and certainly not going to let them get away with perpetration of many social evils like corruption and nepotism and the like.
Kenya has succeeded while so many other newly independent black African nations have failed. What has been the difference? Why has Kenya been able to prosper while so many of its neighbors have found it so difficult to make independence work?
The truth of the matter is that the Kenyans are by their very nature very active and, I should say, progressive people, in the sense that they want to work hard. They value very much peace and stability. These are the things that have driven them. But beyond that, I think it is right to say that they went through a different type of history. That we in East Africa, just the immediate East Africa, had a colonial status here, which put us through great strains, much like you're seeing Zimbabwe go through now. And we had fought a Mau Mau war. Our people, up to about 80,000, had been put in detention camps. Our people had been herded into villages here in Central Province, in the Eastern Province, in the Rift Valley Province, and so on. But all the other people in all the other provinces went through hardship. As a result, people did not wish to go back into that kind of situation after independence. And more fortunate than that is the fact that we had a very dynamic leader, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, who himself had gone through terrible trouble especially the last 9 years before he was released. And so he taught our people to forget the past and to look into the future, to suffer, as he had said, without bitterness. In general, African governments have not achieved what by our standards is democracy. But I think that here in Kenya you've got a very, very notable exception. Even though it is true that I think you would have to classify Kenyan government as an elitist government, in that by and large they do represent the interests of the middle and upper class Kenyans. I don't think it would be accurate to say that that government is not based, does not have a grassroots base. And I honestly feel that in many respects Kenya provides a very, very good model for how societies can evolve in Africa, especially those that come from a great diverse ethnic and racial mixture. How those societies can evolve into, in a harmonious way. And I think bringing this about has been one of the hallmarks of the Kenyan political leadership that I think they deserve a vote of confidence for.
So how do we judge Kenya in the end? Has its peace and stability resulted from the soundness of its political institutions or from the authoritarian rule of its leaders? The answer is difficult because one's perception depends on one's perspective. Kenya is like the color gray, not that it's drab or dull by any means, but gray is perceived differently depending on what it's compared to. Compare gray to black and it looks white. Compare it to white and it looks black. So with Kenya. By the African standard, Kenya is the picture of success. As one Ford Foundation official in Nairobi told me, Kenya is the one country in black Africa which works. It seems by African standards to be amazingly free and amazingly democratic. But compare Kenya to American or Western European standards and the picture is different. Its democratic institutions are tainted by a one-party system. Its leaders have in part succeeded through corruption and nepotism, and its press and its critics tread lightly for fear of government reprisals. By Western standards, Kenya's government seems repressive. But at another level, away from politics and internal disputes, and despite all of its problems, Kenya is unquestionably progressive, its people resourceful and decent. And through more than 15 years of independence, on a continent rocked by conflict, Kenya has remained at peace. It is friend to the Arabs and friend to the Israelis. It trades with Black Africa and it trades with South Africa. It is allied with the United States, but it has warm relations with the Soviet Union. Through its history as an independent nation, Kenya has maintained peace, prosperity, and stability, a goal not often achieved by the leading nations of the world.